Welcome to InFocus with Ejaz Haider. This program is supported by the Center for Security, Strategy and Policy Research. SIPRI is an autonomous policy research center housed in the University of Lahore, and it tackles issues that impact contemporary security and strategic developments. This program is part of that effort. Today's program was planned a few days before last Sunday's proposed sixth round of talks between Iran and the US. I was going to discuss the technicalities of the talks with my guest, who's a leading authority and who I will introduce shortly. But that possibility, it seems, has gone up in smoke because Israel attacked Iran in violation of multiple provisions of international law. It is also clear that the Israeli attack was approved by the Trump administration, with Trump wanting to pressure Iran before last Sunday's talks. In doing so, it seems that he granted Benjamin Netanyahu his 3-decade-long desire to destroy Iran's nuclear capability. But more than that, to shape the environment for pulling the US into the conflict to finish the job for Israel. Nothing new in the Israeli policy. This is exactly what Israel did with Iraq, fully backing George Bush Jr.'s idiotic decision to take out Iraq. This time, too, far from Trump playing Netanyahu, it's Netanyahu who seems to be playing Trump and the United States. If the US enters the fray as a direct belligerent, as opposed to helping Israel as it is doing now, the region will enter a period of great uncertainty. And this is not my opinion or analysis. This is being widely discussed, and most of the scholars agree with this. And if Iran finds itself in an existential crisis and does make good on Sayyid Ali Khamenei's ultimatum that Iran will fight back and not surrender, Iran's targeting strategy could create havoc in the Gulf. It will be a stone in free fall. But let me dive into this with my guest, Dr. Tariq Rauf. Dr. Rauf is an internationally respected authority on nuclear disarmament and non-proliferation issues. From 2017 until 19, he was a member of the Group of Eminent Persons for Substantive Advancement of Nuclear Disarmament, established by the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Japan. He also worked as Director of Disarmament, Arms Control and Nonproliferation Programme at the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, which is SIPRI, and as Senior Advisor to the Chair of the Disarmament Committee at the 2015 Non-Proliferation Treaty Review Conference. From 2002 until 2011, he was head of the Verification and Security Policy Coordination Office at the International Atomic Energy Agency, which is the IAEA, reporting to the Director General, in which capacity he dealt with high priority verification cases involving Iran, Iraq, Libya, North Korea, South Korea, and Syria, and was Coordinator of Multilateral Approaches to the Nuclear Fuel Cycle from 2003 until 2012. He was also the alternate head of the IAEA Delegation to NPT Conferences from 2003 until 2010, and the IAEA Liaison and Point-of-Contact for a number of multilateral control regimes and United Nations Security Council committees. From 1987 until 2000, he was expert advisor to Canada's NPT delegations. His areas of interest include nuclear non-proliferation, nuclear disarmament, nuclear security, international and regional security, nuclear weapons-free zones, international organizations, regional security, especially in North America, South Asia, and the Middle East, among others. So thank you, Dr. Rauf, for being on the program. I normally don't give very long bios, but I wanted to, in this case, just to establish that you have tons of experience of these negotiations and how things unfold, and working also at the IAEA and the NPT Review Conference. It's also good to see you, if so virtually, after 26 years, when I recall we were together at Sandia for the Sandia's annual conference. And the irony is that we were discussing the US NATO bombing of Yugoslavia at that time. And once again, as we meet virtually after 26 years, we're talking about the Israeli attack on Iran. So let's begin with the fact that in terms of international law, as I said in my opening, Israel's decision to attack Iran violates a number of provisions. And it is also clear that it was approved, even if tacitly, by the United States. And while the United States is not a direct belligerent up until now, as you and I speak, it has been facilitating Israel. Well, it's been facilitating Israel for the last 20 months. So give me your opening thoughts on this, and then we will get into more technicalities and nuances of where the situation stands.
Well, good afternoon from Vienna, and it's very nice to see you again, Dr. Ejaz Haider. I'm very grateful for having you host me at this series on CISPR. I've followed many of your programs, which have been very informative and very useful. So let me start by saying, first of all, under the United Nations Charter and under international law, there is no right for preemptive strikes on a perceived enemy. Secondly, strikes on energy installations, especially nuclear installations, are prohibited under the Geneva Conventions Protocol 1, under a number of resolutions and decisions adopted by the International Atomic Energy Agency Board of Governors and General Conference, as well as resolutions of the General Assembly and the Security Council. Further, as you pointed out, Israel is not a member or a party to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, and we all know that it has an arsenal, an undeclared arsenal of nuclear weapons as well as delivery systems. What is not all usually discussed is that it was the British, the French, the Norwegians, and the United States that enabled Israel to have a nuclear arsenal. I'll just point out one detail and move on from there. More than 300 kilograms of weapon-grade, highly enriched uranium came from the United States to Israel to launch its initial nuclear weapons program. On the other hand, Iran has been an original party to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. It signed up to it when it was open for signature in 1968. And it has comprehensive safeguards administered by the International Atomic Energy Agency throughout. And during the time of the Shah, there were full-page advertisements in the New York Times that the Shah of Iran is sitting on a lake of oil, but nonetheless, he will be buying 2 1,000 megawatt General Electric nuclear power plants from the United States because he's a wise leader and he wants to conserve his resources and rely on nuclear energy. So the Iranian nuclear program actually started under the Shah. But when we had the revolution in Iran in 1979, it was stopped. But then after the Iraqi attack on Iran starting in 1979 that lasted for 10 years, Iran resumed its nuclear program under safeguards. So my last point in my opening comments here is that unfortunately for Iran, in 2002, it was discovered that Iran was in fact undertaking clandestine or undeclared nuclear activities related to enrichment of uranium, and that it had acquired centrifuges from what has been described as the international nuclear supply market that involved more than 30 countries and individuals from around the world. And there was one notable scientist from Pakistan who was named by name in this particular regard.
Correct. I'm happy that you went into a bit of history, and I'm going to circle back on that. But here's the thing. I was just before recording this program, I was watching Rafael Grossi's interview on Al Jazeera. As you know, Iran has accused Ambassador Grossi, now Director General of IAEA, on the basis of certain documents that came into Iran's possession from Shorik, in which Iran says that Ambassador Grossi was actually providing information to Israel with reference to Iran's nuclear program. Of course, Director General Grossi has said that this is defamatory, and he repeated that on the program also. But he also said something else, which is factually incorrect. And that is that IAEA is a technical, absolutely independent body which is not influenced by any state in the world. This is what he said on Talk to Al Jazeera. And this is a matter of record because that program is there and anyone can watch it. Now, the thing is that we do know that there have been occasions, especially one that I recall with reference to the Australian diplomat, Richard Butler, who provided information to, or should I say, who actually basically doctored information with reference to Iraq in order to help the Bush Jr.'s administration to make a case against Iraq. You have inside information on the working of the IAEA. I want to ask you if any of these allegations hold water, or if the IAEA indeed is a completely technical body with absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with the world's geopolitics and realpolitik.
Well, that is a very interesting question. So let me go back to my time at the IAEA, which started in March of 2002. The Iran nuclear file started in around August of 2002. Then the Libya file started in December 2003, and Syria was much later. So you will recall that in March of 2003, my boss then, Director General Mohammad al-Baradei, went to the Security Council and said it in black and white that the IAEA had dismantled Iran's previous nuclear program pursuant to UN Security Council Resolution 687 of 1991, and there was no indication that Iran had reconstituted that nuclear program. This is despite, at the time, Secretary Powell coming to the Security Council and making accusations of Iraq having a biological weapons program, unaccounted chemical weapons, and having reconstituted its nuclear program. So the Director General stood up to the most powerful member of the organization, the one member that provides the most funding for the international organization. And during my time, when he was Director General, I was by his side at pretty much all of his important meetings on Iran, Iraq, and elsewhere. And he stood up and what he calls speaking truth to power. And behind my shoulder, you can see his book called Diplomacy in Treacherous Times. So he became actually quite unpopular with the powerful countries. They tried to have him dismissed after his second term and not to run for the third term. Unlike other UN organizations, there are no time limits on the tenure of a Director General. His predecessor, Hans Blick, served for 4 terms, and his predecessor, Sigvard Eklund, served for 5 terms. But they could not find anyone to run against al-Baradei in 2005, because by then he had already received the Nobel Peace Prize along with the IAEA, primarily for their efforts of speaking truth to power on the Iraq file. And as we know, under the Bush administration, the junior and his vice president, they had their own intelligence, which was countering the 18 intelligence agencies of the US, which basically was saying that Iraq had destroyed its weapons of mass destruction program. So during my time, I am personally witness to the IAEA being technical, retaining its independence, standing up to criticism. But after that, after he left, we had a new Director General starting in December 2009. And he issued in November 2011 a very damning report on Iran, which mentioned that Iran had possible military dimensions to its nuclear program. And so the Iran file starts getting complicated from that time on. And then the Israelis also get involved. And so since then, people have made accusations that the IAEA has been influenced. But since I'm not there, I cannot sort of comment one way or another.
Right. But from what I have understood from your detailed answer, it cannot be said, as Director General Grossi has said, that because he made it seem like there are absolutely no pressures on the IAEA. From your answer, it seems to me that that is not the case, and that the IAEA, in a world of realpolitik, has to basically navigate very treacherous waters. And to a very large extent, it would depend on the personality of the Director General of the IAEA to be able to absorb pressure or to succumb to that pressure. Is that impression correct? My understanding correct with response to your answer?
So the way I will respond is that on particularly the Iran nuclear file that started, as I mentioned, in August 2002, the five ICE countries, these are the five English-speaking countries that share top-level intelligence information, plus two from Europe. So these are seven. These seven countries were very involved in trying to pressurize the IAEA on the Iran file, trying to pressurize IAEA inspectors and IAEA staff. They're the ones who primarily provided what is referred to in the IAEA reports as third-party information, which is a euphemism basically for intelligence information.
Correct.
And during our time, I wrote the policy at the direction of the Director General Al-Baradei at the time, that the IAEA does not have the capabilities to authenticate and verify intelligence information provided by its member states, because the IAEA is an international organization. It does not have spies, it does not have satellites, it does not recruit agents. And therefore, the IAEA, if a member state wants to provide information about the nuclear activities of another state, the IAEA will investigate it and, if need be, follow up. But the IAEA will not provide back to the supplier of this information which parts of its intelligence information were correct and which parts of its intelligence information were not correct. So it has to be a one-way stream. But there was always pressure that we are giving you 10 bits of information. You please tell us which of these 10 bits of information on your investigations turn out to be correct or worth investigation and which not. So in that sense, there is always pressure. And now we can see in the current context, since the war with Gaza and also the Iran nuclear file starting from May 2018, when the United States left it on its own, I argue that we are entering a new era of neocolonialism, where we have one preponderant military power with the support of many in the European Union, and then some other countries like Australia, Canada, and Japan, that they are calling the shots. So you can see that in the Middle East, all the Arab states are supine. Gazans are being killed every day. Every day, dozens of starving Gazans are shot when they are going to collect food from this relief agency staffed by mercenaries. So the power balance has changed, and the five in the Security Council are divided, three on the one side, and then Russia and China on the other side. And the three are much more powerful than Russia and China. So in many areas, there is hopeful thinking that China and Russia will be able to push back. But as you can see, the evidence does not support that.
Dr. Rauf, in the interest of decency, although I want to use stronger words, I would stick with supine, as you said, for the Arab states. But your answer is very interesting in the sense that it is Director General Grossi, again, I refer to this recent interview to Al Jazeera. He was asked this question with reference to whether he got the intelligence, as Iran has alleged, from Israel. And he said that IAEA does not get intelligence from the states. But you have just said that you were getting intelligence, although it was a one-way thing, because you were not prepared to, you would do your own evaluations, your own inspections. and perhaps also juxtapose them with the intelligence that you were getting from Five Eyes and these other two European states, but you were not prepared to debrief those member states about which part of their intelligence was accurate, if that be so. Now, that leads us to another issue, which is that up until last year, more or less, the IAEA was basically talking about Iran in kind of, although there were some reports that said that some of the activities Iran was undertaking, about which the IAEA was increasingly unaware of. But there was nothing in that, to the best of my knowledge, correct me if I'm wrong, which led to the kind of damning report that the IAEA just put out 24 hours before Israel attacked Iran. Now, I understand that this is not something which you can take to a court of law, and in terms of, evidentiary status, it would stick. But it does seem very intriguing that the IAEA would come up with this kind of report, and then within 24 hours, Israel would attack Iran. I want to get your view on this coincidence.
So going back to this third-party information, the term third-party information one will find in the Safeguards Implementation Report, which is an annual report on implementation of safeguards in all countries that have safeguards, including Pakistan. And there it says clearly that the IAEA's conclusions about a country honoring its obligations to the IAEA is based on the IAEA's own information through inspections carried out on site in the country, information provided by the state. Every state, including Pakistan, that has a safeguards agreement is obligated to provide information on those facilities which are under safeguards. Now, a non-nuclear weapon state like Iran has to provide information on the entirety of its nuclear activities. A non-NPT state like Pakistan provides information only on those facilities which it has placed under safeguards, because not being a party to the NPT, it does not have a broader obligation. So in the safeguards report, it says there are three types of information. Information provided by the state voluntarily, which is like an accountancy thing. A company keeps books, the accountant comes and does an audit and says, yep, the balances are correct. Then the IAEA does its own inspections. There are inspectors who go on site. There are IAEA cameras. There are IAEA electronic and other instruments installed in nuclear facilities which are providing information to the IAEA. The IAEA buys commercial satellite imagery, and now, as you know, we can get very advanced commercial satellite imagery from Airbus, from Maxstar, and others. And then there's also open source information collected from newspapers, television broadcasts, episodes like this one. And then there is third-party information. So all of this is listed. And the latest Safeguards Implementation Report is for 2024. These reports go from 1 January to 31 December. So the Safeguards Implementation Report for 2025 will come out in June of 2026. So third-party information is there, and including in the report that you're referring to, which was issued on the 31st of May by the IAEA on Iran, it also mentions third-party information. Now, we need to go back to November of 2024. That is the time when the three European countries, United Kingdom, Germany, and France, tabled this resolution asking Iran to cooperate with the IAEA and to provide information on outstanding issues regarding detection of small particles, because through environmental sampling that the IAEA had picked up at 3 locations. And according to the IAEA, the replies provided by Iran were not technically credible. So under the Safeguards Agreement, there is a provision that the Board of Governors can instruct a country to cooperate with the IAEA on an essential and urgent basis. And so in that resolution of, I think, 21 November, they asked the Director General to provide a comprehensive report by the end of spring, meaning spring technically ends on the 20th of June, summer starts 21st of June.
Okay.
So the speculation among some, including I, sort of tend to support that, is that increasingly the three Europeans and the European Union were feeling sidelined. Even the Biden administration in November was not too keen on supporting this resolution, but once the Europeans insisted, the US could not let its allies down. But then starting under the current administration in Washington, you see that they have been trying to foster peace between Ukraine and Russia. They've been trying to engage with Iran, and the three Europeans are completely frozen out. So they were trying to find a place by forcing themselves onto the table. So the timing of the report is dictated by the November resolution and not by anything else. So the IAEA tried to delay this report as much as possible, because the IAEA board meeting was last week, and the report has to be provided for us. So the report basically came out on 31 May, a week before the board meeting. So I wouldn't make a connection there. Others have pointed out that the administration in Washington had given Iran 60 days, and this attack occurred on the 61st day. Some people have tried to make a connection that the findings in the report were quite damning against Iran. I should also note that all these findings relate to activities that Iran had conducted prior to 2003. And the problem Iran has had is that it has not satisfied the agency with some explanations. So currently, even in this report, it says that the current nuclear activities of Iran are not in violation of safeguards. Every NPT country has the right to enrich uranium and separate plutonium, even up to weapon grade. And people forget
under Article 4, I believe.
Yeah,
under Article 4
doesn't give a specific right. It says an inalienable right for peaceful uses. So that enrichment can be included in that. Now, people don't remember that when the Non-Proliferation Treaty was being negotiated in 1967-68, to use this term, the countries of proliferation concern were Japan, Korea, Italy, Germany, Sweden, Switzerland, Canada, and so on. These were the more advanced countries in nuclear technology in the late 60s. They were the ones who said, if we give up our right to make nuclear weapons under the NPT, and we have to accept on-site inspections, we do not want to compromise our right to the nuclear fuel cycle, which means uranium enrichment, and it means separation of plutonium, provided we don't make a bomb out of it, and provided the IAEA gets to inspect it to know that it's for peaceful purposes. So in this current heated discussion, and you have so many experts coming on TV, people don't study history anymore. So it's not that simple.
Tell me about this.
I know you're at an academic institution trying to do a good job.
Yeah, absolutely.
So finally, these three countries, but supported by the US, then had a resolution. And we all should also know that the Board of Governors has 35 members. And the last three resolutions, which have been critical of Iran, have only been adopted by a bare majority of 19 votes in favor. China and Russia have always voted against. This time, Burkina Faso also voted against. And the remaining countries abstained, including Pakistan is now on the board, so it abstained. So you can see that the adoption by the Board of Governors was by a bare majority. The Board of Governors is badly divided, which is also not good for the IAEA. The Board of Governors should be united on this issue. Finally, you had mentioned that I was alternate head of the IAEA's NPT delegation and so on, which is correct. The three documents that the NPT states have adopted by consensus were in 95, 2000, 2010. Since then, they have not been able to. In those three documents, all of states agreed that if a country has suspicions or concerns about safeguards in another country, they should give the evidence to the IAEA, which should investigate and report, and not take matters into their own hands and go and bomb. Like Iraq was bombed in 1981, Syria was bombed in 2007, and now Iran has been bombed in 2025. So here the law is being taken into the hands by a country that is not party to the regime itself. And we see thundering silence. You saw the G7 statement. They called on Iran. There was no talk for cessation of hostilities. There was no condemnation. Fortunately, the UN Secretary General Guterres firmly condemned the attacks on Iranian nuclear facilities. Unfortunately, the IAEA statements have only expressed deep concern. But if we compare it to the IAEA statements on the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant and Chernobyl, there IAEA condemned. So international system now is moving towards the law of the jungle.
Absolutely. I'm so happy that you flagged this, because I was actually going to ask you this question next, with reference to, as a matter of fact, Kaja Kallas has talked about Israel's right to self-defense. You earlier talked about preemption. As a matter of fact, you recall, since we were talking about Iraq also, that there is a lot of debate even about preemption, but prevention, which is a completely different category, and where preemption and prevention were conflated by Bush Jr.'s administration in their attack on Iraq. So there's a lot of moral hazard there. But Grossi was asked this question about these very words, concern. And I wanted to ask you, since you spent such a long time at the IAEA, it might be a technical body, but if something like this happens, which also can lead to radioactivity and other chem biohazards, is it within the remit of the IAEA to actually sound an alarm bell and condemn that activity, just like it did with reference to Russian potential military activity in and around Zaporizhia?
Yes, so the IAEA is the global independent international authority which sets the standards for nuclear safety, nuclear security, and nuclear safeguards. So the IAEA is also the keeper of the Convention on Nuclear Safety, which is an international convention calling for the safe operation of nuclear facilities. The Convention on Nuclear Security calls for protection of nuclear facilities against attacks by non-state actors and other malicious actors. So the IAEA, also under its statute, has the authority to ensure that nuclear facilities, whether a country is a party to the NPT or not, as long as it's a member of the IAEA, and this country, Israel, is a member of the IAEA, they have to honor the obligations under the statute. So those are also, in a sense, being violated. One point I should also mention, that the IAEA was established in 1957, so it's a very old organization. The Chemical Weapons Authority in The Hague was only established in 1997, and the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty Organization was established in 1996. So under the Chemical Weapons Convention of 1993 and the Nuclear Test Ban Treaty of 1996, if a country has concerns about another country's compliance with that treaty, they have to provide the evidence to the executive director of the chemical weapons, or the CTBTO, and the executive director is obligated to share that information with the members of the executive council. And then in a meeting, the accuser state makes its case, and the accused state has the chance to defend itself. And on the basis of that, the executive council decides whether there is reason for concern, investigation, or non-compliance. But the IAEA and the NPT being very old treaties, we don't have that protection. So a country can provide third-party information or intelligence information and make the restriction do not show this information to the accused state. And so this is what has happened. All the information, intelligence information provided to IAEA during my time and later has come with this proviso: do not share this with Iran. So, and the permission to share is only very sanitized information through PowerPoint slides. Don't show them the actual documents, which are containing allegations that Iran is doing X, Y, or Z. So again, these are some details that don't come to the fore. And unfortunately, because of the Iraq file, IAEA also started becoming very politicized. So now, unfortunately, IAEA board meetings are more political and not technical. It sounds very much like the General Assembly. Board of Governors, the governors come and read prepared statements. So you have half the board which is criticizing Iran for not doing X, Y, and Z. The other half of the board is sort of more sympathetic to Iran, that Iran is complying and sanctions should be removed and so on. So in that sense, the Board of Governors and the governance of the IAEA, because it serves at the instruction of the member states and the Board of Governors, is being overtaken by political considerations rather than remaining true to its technical mandate.
This is a more direct answer to my earlier question with reference to Grossi's statement that IAEA is a completely sanitized, technical, independent body and has absolutely nothing to do with politics. Now, here's the thing.
Can I interrupt you there? Sorry.
Yeah, sure.
I think one needs to parse that statement. So the IAEA staff and the Department of Safeguards try their best to do the work technically. The politicization comes from the member states and the General Conference and the Board of Governors. And it can have some effect on the technical part. So I wouldn't conflate the two in that sense.
No, that's a good answer, and I think we need to pass this. You got the Sherpas, and then you got the relatively political side of it, and obviously, but as you said yourself, and as I mentioned also in the case of Butler, for instance, there was this kind of nexus between the technical side and the other side.
So sorry for interrupting again. So Butler succeeded Hans Blix as the chairman of the UN Special Commission on Iraq, pursuant to Resolution 687. So Iraq was a defeated country. So it had to accept a very broad mandate from the Security Council. So the UN Special Commission on Iraq had a very broad mandate. And the Special Commission on Iraq did not have its own inspectorate. So they asked member states. So most of the inspectors came from intelligence organizations of the 5, but mainly from the 3. And they also came with, I would say, more robust operatives who were not above breaking into people's houses in the middle of the night and so on. So in that sense, it was not a professional inspectorate.
That's great. That's a great piece of information.
IAEA inspectors have to be qualified as such. So we have somewhere around 274 inspectors who are trained and qualified. So they are a professional cadre. They, like them, like me, we all took an oath that we serve the organization. We will remain independent. We will not take instruction from any state or any outside party whatsoever. And I would say, to the best of my knowledge, the Department of Safeguards tries its best to honor their pledges to the organization, remain independent and not get affected. But end of the day, everyone is human.
Correct.
And people can have different things. So there are ways of protecting against it, but I'll leave it at that.
So moving on, Dr. Rauf, there is this issue of radiation, chem bio impacts. There is the nuclear plant in Bushehr, which is very close to the Gulf waters. And in the event of a strike on that plant, although the rest of the Fordo and others are more inland, but they can also have, if the Americans use these massive ordnance penetrator, the 30,000-pound bomb, and actually strike the parts of Fordo where there is uranium enrichment. I want to ask you, how much of a radiation problem could that be? And in the event that Bushehr is hit and there is contamination in the Gulf waters, what kind of emergency would that create?
So first of all, regarding the Bushehr nuclear power plant, I don't think that's on the target list. The target list is Iran's enrichment capability.
Okay.
And given the fact, as you mentioned, that Bushehr is on the Gulf, any radiation accident there would have transboundary implications and affect the Gulf states and Saudi Arabia. So I give zero chance of Bushehr being attacked deliberately. Now, as the Director General has pointed out, the pilot fuel enrichment plant, which was above ground, has been destroyed. And the underground fuel enrichment plant at Natanz has suffered damage. And the Director General said he thinks that the 15,000 centrifuges there probably have been rendered unoperational because of the loss of electrical power. But it's also possible that in such complicated industrial facilities, you have what's called an uninterruptible power supply. So
Correct.
It's possible that even if the mains power was cut, this uninterruptible power supply provided enough power for a organized shutdown of the centrifuges rather than pulling the plug and all of a sudden the light goes out.
Yeah, just getting them spun out of control. Yeah, correct.
So coming to Fordo is apparently buried more than 80 meters underground under a mountain. The GBU 57 so-called massive earth penetrator can only penetrate up to 60 meters. So the Iranians obviously knew about this because this was used over Afghanistan at one point in Tora Bora to try to flush out a certain individual. And so they deliberately made it that. But I was listening to somebody yesterday from intelligence organization, and they thought that maybe if 2 or 3 of these massive ordnance penetrators are dropped at the same time, that might implode the mountain or collapse the mountain. And so you don't need to actually penetrate all the way down. The other option is to use drones, and we have seen the way Ukraine has been attacking Russian air bases to block and seal the tunnel entrances to the site. So if the tunnel entrances are blocked and sealed, the people inside are trapped, and eventually you can also cut off the power, so the plant would be rendered unoperational without necessarily having to destroy it. Now, the enriched uranium there is in the form of uranium hexafluoride, which is not very radioactive. The main hazard from uranium hexafluoride is that on contact to air or to moisture, it becomes uranium fluoric acid, a little bit like hydrochloric, which is very corrosive, and it will burn the skin and eyes of a human being if they're unprotected. And also, if they inhale the fumes, they will also suffer catastrophic damage. So one would then need to be in the facility with this hazmat gear and breathing apparatus. The radiation is basically alpha particles, which can be protected against even just wearing a shirt and gloves and a mask. So the hazard is not radiation, the hazard is more the corrosive aspect or the chemical aspect. And given the depth of Fordo, I think it's unlikely that any of these vapors would escape.
Especially if they go for the options that you talked about in terms of blocking and destroying the tunnel entrances and kind of sealing off the entire thing with people inside, and cutting off power. One final question, Dr. Rauf, before I wrap this up. We've talked about the illegality of what's going on. We've also talked about the fact that for reasons of realpolitik, for a number of other reasons, there's nary a condemnation from the Western governments of what is going on. And that is also true of the Western press, where everyone is discussing the possibilities that Israel can use without any reference to the illegality of what's going on. Given this situation, and as I said in my opening, that there is evidence of Iran's targeting strategy in the event of an existential crisis. And that targeting strategy is basically to saturate the Gulf region with missile strikes. Um, your experience, both of the technical experience as well as your knowledge of the geopolitics of the area, where do you think, if the US becomes a direct belligerent, where do you think the situation is headed, and should the people be greatly worried, not only in the region but beyond the region also?
So just going back to your first point, I'm very disappointed that various international and national associations of scientists and physicists have not condemned in any way the assassination of 9 nuclear scientists in Iran, and 7 of them before in previous years. None of them have condemned that these are their colleagues, scientists and physicists. There no international association.
Just one interjection here, Dr. Rauf. No medical bodies, to the best of my knowledge, have condemned the assassination and deliberate targeting of hospitals and doctors and paramedics in Gaza also. So it seems to be becoming a practice of sorts.
Well, to its credit, Lancet, which is the publication of the British medic, has been critical of the bombings of the hospitals and civilians in Gaza continuously. Also, the Iranian state TV was bombed. I don't see the International Union of Journalists coming out. And when a Western journalist is in peril in some other country, CNN, BBC, everyone is up in arms. We know the name of the journalist. And until they're brought back home safely, it's a big issue. So even the journalists are So this basically shows double standards. This is why I'm talking about neocolonialism. One part of the world is expendable. You can bomb them and kill them like flies, and it's all okay. And one can justify it in 7 different ways. That doesn't make it right. I think Iran, the current campaign has shown that Iran was much weaker than it had portrayed itself to be. In a certain respect, it was more of a Potemkin village. I mean, they are completely penetrated. All their intelligence heads and military heads were taken out. The replacements were taken out. They know where the headquarters are. Even the supreme leader narrowly escaped being bumped off, if we have to believe news reports that clearance was not given. So whatever number of missiles they might have, the key vulnerability is missile launchers. A missile cannot go off on itself. You need a launcher. And so the missile launches on northeast Iran are being picked off. So once a missile is launched, the satellites will pick up the heat signature of the launch point. And so you can target it. And of course, this attack is, as you mentioned yourself, is a coordinated attack. It's not just by one attacking country. So they're getting real-time information on satellite monitoring, surveillance, and so on. So the fear is on the side of the Iranians that they might run out of launchers before they'll run out of missiles themselves. Now, fortunately, the Gulf states, about 21 countries, including Pakistan, have issued a joint statement condemning the attacks. And there has been rapprochement between the Gulf states, Saudi Arabia, and Iran. So I think it's unlikely that they would want to attack them because at the moment they don't have any other friends left. So what is more likely is blocking the Straits of Hormuz. One can mine them, sink a tanker that would block a quarter of the world's supply of oil and also gas, which would raise prices around the world. So that's, I think, an easier action on their part rather than trying to target bases. And I think it's much more risky for them to kill people in the bases of other nationalities because it'll give further justification for more attacks on Iran. So Iran, unfortunately for itself, is in a very weak position at the moment. I understand that many Iranian citizens are very upset that over all these years, you taxed us, you spent so much money, and basically we are a sitting duck. And we were told to evacuate Tehran, and many people are evacuating Tehran. And finally, the son of the Shah of Iran has issued a statement that he's willing to come back, restore the monarchy, and he has a 100-day plan to restore the Peacock throne to its original grandeur.
Yeah, absolutely. That was Zahir Shah also when the United States invaded Afghanistan. Well, I was talking to Wali Nasr because, as it happened, his recent book has come out on Iran's grand strategy, and I was going through that, and I was struck by one phrase by Jawad Zarif, which was part of Wali's interview with Zarif, where Zarif talked about the fact that because Iran did not have enough money, so instead of focusing on the Air Force, they focused on developing missiles. Be that as it may, the fact is that, if you're going to go against an adversary like Israel, which is not a state, a standalone state, but is an extension, a military, political, strategic extension of the United States, then you probably need to have very effective ground air defenses and also a very effective air force. In any case, as I said in my introduction, the situation seems, greatly uncertain in terms of number of unknowns. Seems like a stone in free fall. Let's see where it goes and how it unfolds. But thank you so much, Dr. Rauf, for being on the program, for your insights, historical tidbits, and also explaining and putting things in a perspective. This is all from this episode. If you like the discussion, do subscribe to our CESPA channel. It doesn't get me or the channel any lucre, but it certainly would make us happy. Until next time, stay blessed and goodbye.